I go to my website qtpselenium.com, and out there, if you go to the training section, then as for module 4, we should be working on inheritance interfaces, overloading, overriding, and other stuff. Fine. So let's start with inheritance. Inheritance is an important concept of object-oriented programming, and you use a lot of inheritance in the architecture of WebDriver as well. Okay, there is a lot of inheritance. Now, what inheritance means? As the word suggests, inheritance in English, it means that to acquire something, right? To inherit something by default from your family, right? So inheritance in Java works something like this. I'll create a new project, day 5. Hold on. Okay, in day 5, I'll just create a class called, say, I've created a simple class called car. Okay, now what are the features of car? Car has got a global variable, say in price. Okay, it's got a function called start. In this I will write starting car. Okay, now I'll make new class called test with the main function. In test, I can create the object of the car class, right? Car C equals to new car. Okay, and I can create as many objects, right? Now, if I make a new car class called BMW, right? And now BMW is a car. We know that it will have all the properties of the car. So I can copy this whole code in the car class and paste it inside BMW class. But this is not a good practice. Why? That's because suppose if I'm having 1,000 cars, then I'll have to separately make I'll have to copy this code inside 1,000 classes, right? So that doesn't make sense. That's not a good practice, right? So I want BMW to acquire all the properties of the car class. Okay. So what I do, I write over here extends car. So extends car means that it is inheriting the car class. Okay, so BMW is inheriting the car class. Diagrammatically, it is representing like this. If you are reading any documentation, then inheritance will be represented like this. This is class A. If class B inherits class A, that is, it acquires all the properties of class A, then you have a arrow symbol like this. That is, B is extending class A. Alright, now, what's the advantage for this? The advantage will be that the class BMW will have these price and start as the inner components. Okay, for example, this is the scope of the car class. This is my car class. Then the scope of the BMW class will be this. it will have all the properties of the car class, plus it can define its own properties apart from car class. Okay, for example, it can define an own function like public void theft safety, something like that. Okay, now if I go to my tests.java, over there if I write c dot, I will get c dot price option. I can initialize price, then I can say c dot uh, start, that is start the car, right? Now I can also create an object of BMW. BMW be equals to new BMW. So if I call b dot price, I can say 200, and b dot start can also be called. The start function was never a part of BMW class, but because BMW acquires properties of the car class, I can call the start function. Now I can also say b dot theft safety, something like this. But I cannot call the function c dot theft safety because theft safety is not the part of the car class. Okay, theft safety is not the part of the car class. It should be SA. Alright. So this is the advantage of inheritance. That is, one class can acquire the properties of other class. The out here, technically the car class is known as the super class or the parent class, and the BMW class is called as the child class or the parent. The car class will be known as, this is the car class, right? I'll just write it down over here. This is known as the parent class or super class. Okay, this is known as the child class or subclass. Right, now I can have hierarchy and I can have an unlimited hierarchy. Okay, the BMW has also got special models. Suppose there's a model called X for BMW. So I can create a class x.java and extend it to BMW class and add additional properties into it. Right? Similarly, the architecture of Selenium has also been implemented in the same way. Okay, I'll talk about the architecture of Selenium after covering the topic of inheritance. Okay, so now let us see one more thing, that suppose in the car class I have another function called public void stop. Okay, and I'll write stopping car. I have another function public void refuel. Right, now BMW will acquire all the properties, that is, it will have all these three properties. But BMW will tell you that fine, although the car property I am acquiring, the start property I am acquiring from the car class, I am no longer interested in starting the way the car starts. I want to implement the start function on my own. Okay, so what it does is that In TreeView Package Explorer, yes, you can actually use the TreeView Package Explorer to create inherited classes, right? You can definitely do that, but it's up to your like your habit. I don't have a habit for that. Okay, so what the best way I use Eclipse is that suppose I have made 100 different Java files or in the package explorer. This is known as the package explorer on the left hand side. It's got a lot of views. Okay, now the best thing, the best way to work with it is you can click on this linking arrows, these two linking arrows, right? When you click on it, the file which is currently opened, that will be highlighted. Okay, suppose if I open this pizza factory.java, okay, so this file over here gets highlighted in the previous project. Okay, if I open pizza.java, see pizza gets highlighted. So I prefer working in this view. You can prefer working in any view. Fine. When working with Selenium, you will use inheritance. Okay, you might make your own inherited classes. Okay, but most of the times you will use the inheritance concepts from the classes which are inbuilt in the architecture of Selenium. Okay, so that's the thing. Now, coming back to the issue, the program, I had made the car class with three functions: start, stop, and refuel. And my BMW class is that fine. I am extending car. I'm calling the car. I can call the car class a start function, but I want to implement the start function on my own, right? So for that, what we do is that we can make a function called public void start, and I can write system.out.pre and println BMW starting. So this is known as overriding. Overriding always happens when there is inheritance. Okay, and start function out here is overridden. That is, it is present in the base class or the parent class as well, and it is present in the child class as well. Okay, now if I in the test.java, if I go and call c.start, okay, I'll just write in double quotes overridden, right? If I write c.start and BMW b.start, okay, and I run this program, then in output you will see that when you call c.start, it prints starting the car. Okay, but when you print b.start, it prints BMW starting. So the corresponding methods, they get called. If I remove the start function, if I don't do the overriding part, then when I call the b.start, it will call the start function in the parent class. Okay, so when I write child class dot some function, it first goes and searches that function in the child class. If it is there, then it will call then Java will call the function in the child class. Okay, so what happens to the constructor execution for an inherited class? This is the question. Okay, what happens to the constructor execution? Right, now suppose I have a constructor for car class, public void car. Yesterday we talked about constructors, right? Okay, this is the constructor for BMW class, right? Inside it I will write system.out.println inside constructor of BMW, right? And suppose I have a constructor for car class as well. What does constructor it initializes your object. It helps to initialize your object. It is called as soon as you create the object, right? So I create the constructor for car class as well. Okay. Now, technically speaking, when I create the car class, it's just got the features of the car class. Okay. But when I create the BMW class object, okay, it's got the features of the car class as well as BMW class objects. Okay. Now let me comment the whole code /star and */ will comment the whole code. Okay. And I will just write over here new car. Okay. I am just writing new car, creating an object so that the constructor of the car class is called. Okay. When I run this, hold on. Oh, sorry. There is no return type of the constructor. I accidentally wrote void over here. Sorry for that. Fine. There is no return type for a constructor. Simple, a public, and the constructor name. The name of the constructor should be same as the name of the class. Fine. When I write new car now and run the program, it says inside constructor of the car class. Okay, which is by default because I'm creating the object of the car class. Okay, now but if I write new BMW, okay, and run this, it prints inside the constructor of the car class and inside the constructor of BMW. Why? I am calling the BMW class constructor over here. I am not calling the car class constructor here, but the BMW class is extending the car class. That means that the object should acquire the properties of the car class as well. So Java automatically first, instead of executing this constructor, Java will automatically execute the constructor of the parent class car, and then it will execute the constructor of the child class. Okay, so the constructors get executed, that is the parent class constructor gets executed as well along with the child class constructor. Okay, now regarding constructors, there is a lot more. I can teach you a lot more things about constructors, right? But that will actually not help you while working with Selenium. Okay, that will be that will be not so relevant. Fine. So I think this much is more than enough for constructors if you want to learn Selenium. Fine. So the parent class constructor is executed before the child class constructor. That's the base. Okay. So I'll just comment this line as well and uncomment the code which I was making. Alright. So in the BMW class, I have overridden the function start. Right? If you have any questions, feel free to ask me. Okay. Now there is a third way, which is the most important way. Okay. I can write in Java the parent class car object says C1 equals to new child class BMW. You see that what I am doing? The reference is of the parent class, that is car, and the object is of the child class BMW. Okay. Now how this will be helpful? Okay, I'll talk about the practical usage of this thing, that is parent class reference equals to new child class, in some time. Okay, once I start interfaces, I'll tell you about that. Fine. But what can we do with C1? That is important. Okay, what all can we do with C1? What all functions can we call? In car class, I have the functions start, stop, and refuel. So can I call all three of them? Let's see that. If I write C1 dot start, I can call it. Okay. C1 dot stop. Obviously, when I can call the start function, I can also call the stop function. And C1 dot refuel, I can also call that. Now in the child class BMW, I have the function theft safety. Okay, can I call that? Let's try. C1 dot theft safety. No, I cannot call that. Okay, that means that by writing this combination car C1 equals to new BMW, you can only call functions of the superclass. Then the question arises that, okay, fine, if I can only call the functions of the superclass, then what's the advantage of creating the object of BMW? Why do we write BMW? I could have also written new car. Okay, the advantage is that, listen to this carefully. This will be used in inheritance, that if any function is overridden, that will be called. Okay, that means that out here the start is overridden function. This will be called from the BMW class, this will be called from the car class, and this will also be called from the car class, because stop and refuel are not overridden. So by writing the parent equals to new child, you can call all the functions of the parent, but the functions which are overridden in the child, those will be called. Okay, I will just write system.out.println star and run the code. So after this, it goes into constructor, and then you see it prints BMW starting. That is the output of this line. Then stopping car and refueling car in the normal manner. Fine. So three ways of creating objects in inheritance. Either you can just create the object of the parent class and you can use only the properties of the parent class. You cannot use the properties of the child class. Or you can create an object of the child class and you can utilize the properties of parent as well as child. Right? Or the third way is that you can write the parent equals to new child. Fine, and then you can write C1 dot start, C1 dot, that is, you can call the overridden functions of the child class and the main functions of the parent class. Okay, now this will be used in inheritance, and inheritance is utilized a lot in architecture of Selenium. Right, now let me copy the file which I made yesterday, the Selenium test.java, into today's project. Okay, now in that, what did I do? I added the Selenium capabilities into my project first. I'll tell that later on, how to include the Selenium capabilities into the project after I explain you the concept of jar files, right? Now this program is simple. Out here what I was doing, yesterday I had made this file Firefox driver and I had created the object of the Firefox driver and I was navigating to my site. Right? Okay. Now practically we avoid doing this. Okay. What we do, we use the concept of inheritance and overriding to do this with the help of interfaces. Okay, so there are three things. I just told you: inheritance and overriding. Overriding is that the same function present in child class as well as the parent class, and the number of arguments and the type of arguments should also be the same. Everything should be same. Okay, and now I will tell you about interfaces, and then I will pick up the architecture of Selenium and create some Selenium tests. not tests exactly, but some sample codes, right? Now interfaces. If somebody comes and tells me that fine, I have my own business running and I want to develop a software application for that business. Okay, so the client comes and tells us that fine, I have my own bank and I want to implement a banking software, right? So first, what we do, we while the design phase and all, we decide about our interfaces. What will be the interface? Interface is something which defines the contract which the application will be following. Fine. You right click on your default package and say new interface. Instead of new class, you define a new interface. Okay, I will name my interface as bank. Okay, and see, it is writing public interface bank over here. And this will just have the method declarations, no method bodies. Interface only has method declaration. Okay, no body. Okay, for example, I can make a function like public void transfer money. Okay, and put a semicolon in the end. This declares that you are not implementing this method. Nobody has it, can't store variables. So the question being asked out here is that fine, I can declare a function with no body, but what happens to the variables? You can declare the variables. I can declare a variable, say int minimum balance, but it's necessary to initialize this variable. Okay, and the value of this variable cannot be changed. It is final. Okay, I'll talk about the final keyword in coming classes, but just remember that whatever variable you declare in the interface, you cannot change that, right? And you can have functions like public void credit public void debit. But if anybody looks at this interface, okay, he will get to know that fine, these are the operations being performed by this interface. It defines the contract that this is what the application will be doing. Okay, you cannot, I'll make a new class, say test bank. Okay, no, interface cannot hold static functions. Okay, there are some rules. No static functions. No, not at all. Right? Whatever function which you, cannot change the variable values, and it's mandatory to initialize variables. Okay, it is highly unlikely, I'll repeat, it is highly unlikely that in your project you will create interfaces. Okay, you will use the existing interfaces made in Java. Okay, do I need to mention the final? No, you are not required to mention that. By default, it is like that. Okay, so it is mandatory to initialize the variables. Fine. I will talk about final keywords in the coming classes, right? So public void transfer money, credit and debit are three functions. As I was telling you, you will not be required to make interfaces. You will be required to work with existing interfaces. But before that, let me tell you what's the advantage of this interface. What is the advantage of doing this? That is, I'm not declaring any body. If I go to my newly created class, test bank, okay, and in test bank, I try to create the object of the bank class. I say that bank B equals to new bank, okay, and I cannot instantiate. You cannot create an object of an interface. Interface is abstract in nature. It is incomplete. You cannot create an object of something which is incomplete. See, the error says that if I move my mouse over the error is saying cannot instantiate the type bank. Alright? And if you go to bank.java, then I'll add one more rule, cannot create an object. Object of interface, right? You cannot instantiate the interface. No body means when you write a function, this is the body of the function, right? When I write the start function, there is a curly bracket starting, there is a curly bracket ending. In this, I have the complete declaration of the function. But if you look at the interface bank, then in the interface, I have this semicolon. It is abstract. I don't know how the bank will transfer the money, but I have just made this function that fine. My application of bank, implementing bank, will definitely have this function. Okay? Suppose after that I make a new class called HSBC Bank. Fine. Why static functions are not allowed in the interface? Because interface is actually used for object-oriented programming. Okay, when you say object-oriented, then you mean by saying that you have to create objects, and static is never a part of object. It is common at a memory location. Okay, interface. This is a very I can give you a brief overview about this, because if I talk about it in depth, I can keep on talking about it for hours. Right? Object-oriented programming. Interfaces are a part of object-oriented programming, and static is not a part of an object. It is common to all the objects. So this is the brief overview which I have given. That's why we don't do it. Whosoever designed Java designed it like that, and he had a basic logic going on and he designed it correctly, right? So I have this bank class and I have this HSBC bank, right? You can press F2 on the class name and append the class name as well. This is the shortcut in Eclipse. If you press F2 on any class, you can rename that class or you do whatever with it, with the name of the class, right? Now HSBC bank is a bank. In inheritance, there is always a relationship of is-a. In inheritance, there is a relationship. Okay, so HSBC bank is a bank, and it will say that fine, I oblige to the contract of the bank. So what it will write? It will write HSBC bank implements bank. Now, when we have this is also inheritance. This is also a kind of inheritance, that is, it is acquiring all the properties of the bank. But when we have inheritance, that is one class, that is BMW class is extending another class, we write extends. But when we have this, the parent class is an interface, then we write implements. If the parent class is a normal Java class, then it will write extends. But it's an interface, then it will write implements. And if HSBC bank class is implementing all the is implementing the bank interface, then it becomes mandatory for it to override all the functions from the bank class. That is, it is mandatory for HSBC Bank to actually implement all these three functions, right? So if this is HSBC Bank, then just move your mouse over this and click on the option add unimplemented methods, right? And when I do that, I have this code auto generated. Okay, the symbol on the top @override, this symbolizes that your function is being overridden from the parent class. If somebody else, a third person, reads your code, he will automatically understand by reading this that fine, this is an overridden function. It's present in the parent class and as well as the child class, right? So you can write system.out.println transfer money. Okay. Similarly, you can write very simple example. I'm taking a very simple example. Phil, no audio.